You're going to have to wait a few minutes before you find out why I got sprayed with fuel again, but the biggest mystery is why am I even working on this blower again? It was only a year ago that I worked on it and went from top to bottom on the fuel system and got it working the best I could, so why is it back again? Well, that's the mystery I'm still trying to figure out. In today's video, we look at this Weed Eater brand leaf blower, and the problem is that it won't start. More specifically, when pressing the bulb, it won't fill with any fuel either. The worst part is that when the blower left my hands over a year ago, it was working just fine. So does that mean the user was the problem, or is there something else wrong with the fuel that we're putting into it? Now, I'm going to try and repair this blower, however, it may not be the exact repair you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. Now, we're only going to mention what these other options could be. We don't have enough time to look into them, but if you need more information on these options, you're welcome to ask as many questions as you need to. So my first question I had for the owner was, how much was the blower used and what kind of fuel are you putting into it? Turns out they didn't use it all that much before it started having problems, and as for the fuel, they were using something like this, which is engineered fuel for small engines. The problem is that this fuel is the best fuel you can use for a small engine and should keep you from having any fuel-related issues. So why is it acting like it has a fuel-related issue? The first thing I want to do is pour out the fuel that's still left in the tank. This will let us know if the user is the issue or if it's a fuel issue, and I'm absolutely shocked what came out of the tank. This is not normal. Engineered fuel should not be this murky and with deposits floating in it. I know it's hard to see the stuff floating in it, so I'll put the jar over a paper towel, and this should make it easier to see. Now, if these deposits made its way into the carb, this would clog the screen inside it and cause our issues. The only way this terrible fuel could get into the carb is if the fuel filter had come off the fuel line, but after fishing out the line, it turns out the filter is still connected to it, so this only deepens the mystery. First, why is the fuel in such bad condition? And secondly, how did the deposits make it past the fuel filter and into the carb? If you look inside the tank, it looks as though I didn't get all the deposits, so we'll have to clean the tank out here in a little bit. But first, I want to put some fuel into the carb's throat and start it just to make sure it still runs and nothing terrible happened to it in the short time it was running. Well, it took several pulls, but at least we were able to confirm that the engine does start and run for a short time with some priming. Before we go any further, I'm going to flush the tank with some stale gasoline I was able to save from a generator project. We'll then see what I wasn't able to get out of the tank the first time. So I got the rest of the deposits out of the tank, and when there's this much gasoline, it doesn't look that bad, but when there was hardly any fuel in the tank, it looked much worse. So since the tank is clean, I want to put some fresh mixed fuel in the tank and show you the next issue it's having. As you can see when pressing the purge bulb, there's no fuel filling it, and the fuel is having a hard time even making its way through the fuel line from the tank. Just for fun, I do want to try and start the engine and see if we can get it to start and run on its own. The good news is that it starts and runs, but the bad news is that it's doing it while the carb is fully choked, which it's not supposed to do. And if we go to partial choke, the engine will stop, which means there's a good chance the inlet screen inside the carb is fully clogged, causing a restriction in the fuel flow through the carb. And this next part I have not been looking forward to. When I was filming this video, I was pressing the bulb for about 30 seconds, trying to get the bulb to fill up with some fuel, and while doing so, with a blocked fuel passage, it apparently pressurized the fuel tank. So when I removed the fuel line, it then pushed out all the fuel, causing quite a surprise. Now after relieving the pressure in the tank, it shouldn't happen again. The first part I'd like to look at is the pumping side of the carb, which is great because this is where the inlet screen is located at. And as you can see, the inlet screen is that brown circle in the carb. The part that's bad is that it's not supposed to be this color. The color is from the deposits from the fuel that have mysteriously made its way past the filter media. Now this might not look like a lot of deposits, but it's enough to prevent the engine to run off choke. Now, for me to safely clean the screen, I need to remove the needle and rocker arm assembly that's located under the metering diaphragm. Now, I replaced the diaphragm last year, so I know it's good and flexible, but if yours is somewhat stiff, I would recommend replacing it. With the diaphragm gone, I can now remove the bolt that holds the assembly, then start to clean the screen using carb cleaner. But before I do that, I want to show you just how clogged the screen is, and as you can see, the fuel is not flowing through it after pressing the rocker arm. Now be very careful when taking these tiny parts out of the carb because they're very easy to lose. If you do lose any of these parts, I would just consider replacing the carb with a new one. Now to clean the screen, I'm going to put some fuel into the pocket and then agitate it. Then I'll use some carb cleaner on it. Now since the deposits are fairly large, I don't think it's going to be tough to clean. Now once the screen is clear, I'm going to make sure the carb cleaner is going to pass through the screen. If the cleaner doesn't pass through it, keep cleaning the screen until it does pass through it. Since our screen is letting the cleaner pass through it, it means we can start putting the carb back together. I'm also going to check to see if fuel will flow through the screen as well, and fortunately it is passing through it. If yours still isn't allowing any fuel to go through it, then you're going to have to continue to clean it until it does. However, I would also consider taking the less time-consuming route of just replacing the carb with a new one. Not only is it easier, but you'll also save yourself from a migraine. Once the rocker arm is back in, test to make sure it's moving like it's supposed to. If it's not, you're going to have to take it out again and then reinstall it until it does. Now let's take a minute to recap what's going on. So far, I'm still trying to figure out what happened to this blower. Why did the carb get clogged while using engineered fuel, and where did the deposits come from? Now oddly enough, the best answer came from the owner of the blower itself. They believe there might have been old varnished fuel left in the tank from the last time it had fuel in it. It would have been tough to notice it in the tank, but once they got it back and started using the engineered fuel, the varnish was then slowly dissolved by the fuel, then passed through the filter, and ultimately got trapped in the inlet screen and causing our running issue. To be honest, it was quite surprising to hear this assessment from the owner, but it seems to be the most plausible theory, so that's what I'm going to go with as well. So how can I avoid this situation next time? I might have to get a camera to look inside the fuel tank to make sure there's no varnish in it, and also I might have to stop using the cheaper style of fuel filters and use the more expensive ones with a different design that would keep this from happening. Just to make sure it doesn't happen, I am going to replace this one. Now there's nothing wrong with the filter, but there is a chance for the fuel to make it past the stone. This other style though won't allow that to happen. The last thing we need to do is confirm fuel flow through the lines and make sure the bulb is also filling up with some fuel. So when pressing the bulb, fuel should come up the filter line and into the carb. It will then fill the bulb and then make its way out of the carb through the return line and back to the tank. Now this style of carb does not push any fuel into the engine. It only takes the air out of the lines and puts the fuel in them, making sure it gets to the carb. And as you can see, it is flowing like it's supposed to, and that means we can finally try and start it. So it looks like it's working just fine now, and hopefully after cleaning the tank of the leftover deposits and with the new fuel filter, this shouldn't happen again. Now when I gave the blower back to the owner, I did take a sample of their engineered fuel just to make sure there wasn't anything in it, but it was clean with 0 deposits in it, so the theory about the old varnished fuel in the tank makes sense. Another option as to why this blower would start and run but wouldn't stay running would be a clogged spark arrestor screen. If you suspect there to be a clog, I would remove the screen and inspect it. The problem is that I don't think the screen is serviceable on this particular model. So in the end, we got this blower working again and also changed the fuel filter to help avoid the problem again. To be honest, this really isn't a bad blower, it's just not ideal for big jobs, but if you do choose to use it, just be prepared to be disappointed. There are better blowers on the market that are slightly more expensive than this one, so in this situation, I'd rather pick the middle of the road versus the bottom. So my question is, if you saw this blower on the side of the road, would you stop to pick it up so you can use it, or would you give it away to someone you didn't like? Personally, I'd pick it up, but I doubt I'd be keeping it for any longer than I have to. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.